Hi, everyone. Hello. Hi, everyone. Happy spring. Thank you for coming to our March lecture this evening with Rob von Bernewitz. Some of you who frequent the Historical Society may know Rob because he is one of our docents. He's also the park manager at Frank Melville Park. He's also a musician that you probably see around town playing. And he does a whole lot more at many other historical societies around Suffolk County. So get to know Rob. Thank you again for joining us tonight. We have a lot happening at the Historical Society. If you follow us on social media, you may see that we have been busy over the last several days with Eagle Scouts. We're building new furniture. We're installing a little free library tomorrow, and we're gearing up for our farmers market that kicks off in May. Before the farmers market, though, we are hosting our annual community-wide yard sale. And that is a yard sale for everyone to come and join in on the fun. So if you're looking to sell some stuff that's been collecting dust in your attic or in your garage, come to the Historical Society and sell with us. And it's sure to be a fun day. That's on May 20th. And you can find all the information on our website. You can also, on your way out, there's a flyer of upcoming events and a little QR code that's on that flyer. And you can scan it with your phone to see the full list of everything that's coming up, probably for the entire year. So we're trying to keep that calendar pretty active. But without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Rob to present. Sorry, it's a longer title than I'm used to. It's Cemeteries.
Graveyards and Cemeteries of Long Island.
There you go. Thank you so much, Rob.
Hello, everyone. Graveyards and Cemeteries of Long Island. Why do I do this? It's fun to hunt them down. A lot of them that you visit are park-like, so you're out in the fresh air. You can learn so much from just looking at the headstones in a grave site. You can learn about genealogy, even about an area. Like I'll be driving on a road, for example, Phillips Road, and I'll go to the local grave site. And sure enough, there's the Phillips family in the plots, and that's happened quite often. Out east, there's a place called Squiretown Road. I went to the local cemetery, and there's all squires there. So you can learn about genealogy. You can learn about class structure of the areas, of the people that are buried there. Some stones are elaborate, some stones aren't. You can learn about the history of the area. Back in the early days, when the settlers were arriving, they were actually, you couldn't get a hold of stones, and you couldn't have, there wasn't church cemeteries, so they would just bury them on their property. So Long Island has plenty of family sites that are all over the place. I found a lot of them. There's still many more to be found. And it's a challenge. You're going into the middle of the woods. You might be going near somebody's property. So occasionally I put on a yellow vest and I act like I'm important. So we'll get started. And it doesn't come without pain. In this field, you can get attacked by mosquitoes. You can get pricked by sticker bushes, ticks, the whole 9 yards. So it's fun, but you got to be careful. At this time of year is the best time to go looking because there's no foliage. So Graveyards and Cemeteries, the Setauket edition. Let's see if I can get this right here.
Point it towards the computer and see if that. Oh, let's see. Sorry, guys. Of course, we have to have.
Hello, everybody out in Zoom land also.
Yes. Okay. I can hit the next button for you because now this is not working.
It was working before. Okay.
Nothing is working.
There we go. Types of burial sites on Long Island. There's a wide variety, believe it or not, of different types of cemeteries and graveyards. And we'll go to the first one, and this is the holy grail of them all. I like to start from the top. The North American Ancient Burial Ground in Montauk. There's such a great feeling that you get standing over there and just realizing how old the site is and how historic it is. You can see a little circular area of field stones, and somebody's buried, or maybe a couple of people are buried inside there. And supposedly the Native Americans bury their dead sitting down instead of lying down. Stephen Talkhouse, one of the late great descendants of the great Sachem Wyandanch, is buried in this particular site.
This is working now.
Okay. So yes, this is one of my favorite. There are quite a few Native. I'm sorry. Sure. Sorry. There are quite a few Native American burial sites on Long Island. We have some in Mastic at the Pahoospatuck. We have the Shinnecock site. There's one out in County, Douglaston. The Matinicocks are buried there, and of course, various areas where we don't even know about, probably here in Setauket as well. Bev will know a little bit more about that later. The Southold Presbyterian Church is the oldest surviving colonial burial ground in New York. It has 20 stones from the 17th century, and it has the oldest known stone. There may have been older sites previous, but they're lost to development and other types of people who just didn't care about them. But this is the oldest colonial burial site in New York. On the western side of town, of course, the English came and landed on Long Island in Southold and Southampton. There's an argument between which area they came to first, but I'm going to go with Southold. And the Dutch came and settled in the New York City area. So this is an example of a surviving Dutch colonial gravesite in Flatbush, Brooklyn. You'll see a lot of names, Van this, and a lot of Dutch names in this place. And it's in pretty good shape as well. Oh, lost it again.
Why?
Here's an example of a small family burial site. I grew up in Smithtown, so I happen to know where this one was. It was behind somebody's house, and when I was a kid, I saw it. So I went back, and sure enough, it's still there. There's a bunch of them in Smithtown, and there's a few around this area as well. And again, all over the islands. And sometimes in the middle of nowhere. It's very hard and difficult to find. But this is a typical example of a 3 burials plot.
You know the family?
Yes, I think it was the Gilmores, I believe. Yeah, I believe it was the Gilmores. This is an example of a larger type of family plot, the Underhill Private Family Cemetery in Laddingtown. That big monument there is John Underhill, who was actually born in the 1500s. He was one of the early colonial settlers out in Southold, and then he made his way into the Oyster Bay area. And this is around there. This particular private family cemetery is still active. They're still burying the family there. Sorry, I'm sorry. Yep, I got it. I got it. Let me just make sure that's the right one. Okay, Calvary Cemetery, Queens. You've all seen this one. This is on the expressway, is right in front of that church. 3 million people are interred there. It's the largest cemetery in the United States. It's very, very impressive. This is an example of when they ran out of church church space and there was diseases in the 1800s, they actually outlawed from any more burials in Manhattan, and they started buying rural areas to make their own cemeteries away so that nobody would get sick. But this one grew tremendously, and it's just one example of one of the outskirts cemeteries. You'll see more later in the Cypress Hills area. Here's an example of a Quaker cemetery in Jericho. You'll notice all the stones are the same, basically. They didn't believe in class structure. So even if you had more money than your neighbor who was buried next to you, you still got the same treatment when you passed away. There's quite a few surviving Quaker cemeteries on Long Island. You have them in Westbury, Hicksville, I believe, Bethpage, Wantor. In Prospect Park in Brooklyn, there's a surviving one. And in Flushing, there's another old surviving Quaker cemetery. So they, came to America to escape persecution, religious persecution. And they had a few issues at the beginning, but they basically were allowed to settle. This is an example of a nice African-American burial site in Westbury, nicely preserved. The church is over 150 years old, and it's very well maintained and taken care of. Cypress Hills National Cemetery, one of the first national cemeteries on Long Island. It's got a beautiful tree, as you can see. It's full. So after this national cemetery filled up, they opened up a Pine Lawn, or Long Island National Cemetery, they call it, in Pine Lawn. That's getting full as well. And therefore, they just opened another one in Calverton. They have plenty of property there, and there's already over 200,000 people buried in Calverton. This is a disturbing picture in more than one way. First of all, it's a potter's field from Kings Park State Hospital, and they lost the records of who's buried there, number one. Number two, they moved it from another location and just randomly buried the people. Number three, cemetery and trespassing are spelled wrong on the sign. So they totally get no respect. This is one of three Kings Park State Hospital Potter's Fields. Central Islip State Hospital has its own Potter's Field. Pilgrim State has its own Potter's Field. And there's also another one in Smithtown where people who were less fortunate, or if they died and they didn't know who they were buried in this Potter's Field. And it's unfortunate. Bryant Park and Madison Square Park in Manhattan were both Potter's Fields at one time. And the largest publicly funded Potter's Field is Hart Island, next to City Island, right off the bridge area. Cemeteries began to take a very park-like setting. You could walk around and see nice monuments and statues. This particular one is from the late 1800s in the Port Washington area, and it's very nice. There's nice gardens, chairs you can sit on to reflect. This is a local secular cemetery here in the Three Village area. That's one of the first Jewish cemeteries on Long Island. As you can see, you can drive up there or you can take the stairs. And here we have the infamous Greenwood Cemetery in Brooklyn. This is a beautiful site, over 500 acres, many, many famous people buried there. You paid for the plot. If you want to be buried by the pond, you pay more. If you want nice trees, you pay more. And they say, build whatever kind of monument you want. There's no holes barred. So you'll find gigantic mausoleums down to simple headstones at Greenwood. This particular site is unusual. It's out in the Orient Point area. It's one of the very few sites that have the slave owners and the slaves buried at the same location. There's a little controversy these days about it, but I won't go into it, whether it's actually real or not, because it's facing in the wrong direction. Usually the headstones face east, so the sun comes up and rises at them, and this one faces more in a southerly direction. This is an interesting grave site in Sag Harbor. It has indigenous Americans, African Americans, and early settlers all sharing the same land and the same burial ground. And of course, you have your pet cemeteries. You got to bury your pets somewhere. This is a cute little kitty corner where all your kitty cats could be buried. There's quite a few of these on the island as well. There's one out in West Hampton, Bidawee. There's one in Wanto, which is huge, and I think President Nixon's dog is there. Okay, types of grave markers found on Long Island. This historic gravesite is the South End Burial Ground in Southampton. And you'll notice it has some very old headstones there. But what you also notice is a big open field with no headstones. And that's because the early settlers were here so early that they didn't even have time to import the stones from Connecticut yet. So they had ground penetrating radar here and found that this whole cemetery is full. Some of these stones are from the 1600s. The earliest type of stone, and a very easy one to get, was just a basic rock laying around, if you couldn't get a gravestone from Connecticut or Boston. This particular one from Brookville has a date scratched in it of 1770 and initials. So somebody's buried there, and they found the nearest thing that they could use to mark it. Here's your standard first headstone. It's a three-lobed stone. Nobody's really sure of why they picked this style, but the current theories are it's reminiscent of a door that leads you to heaven, number one, or it's the headboard of a laying down burial site, and the footstone is the footboard. It's quite common to have two stones with one person. This is three different types of crude stones. This is also a very historic site with Native Americans and African Americans. It fell into disarray, and the Quakers of Matinacock got together and saved the location, and now it's very beautiful and very well taken care of. Here is the oldest known burial on Long Island. This is in Southold. It's called the Box Tomb. William Wells, 1671. This is the earliest known burial site on Long Island. When you notice in this one, you have a concrete or some kind of mixture with a slab on top of it. If they didn't have the box style, they just used the slab. This is very common as well. And it was expensive to get this size stone imported because it was heavy. So people with money had these large stones. Here we have the death head. This was brought over, a leftover from the medieval times of a symbol of death. It was a stern warning that you're not going to be here long and time is running out. And you're going to fly to heaven eventually, and it might come sooner than you think. This was brought over by the Puritans. That's one style death head. This particular site in Southold is a very, very interesting site because it's got a lot of different types of stones. Here's one from the St. George's Cemetery in Hempstead, another death head, but this one has a crown. Very well preserved. These sandstone stones come from the Connecticut area because there's a quarry of sandstone there, whereas the slate stone that you saw before is probably from the Boston area because there's a slate quarry there. Later on in Vermont, they found marble that cut all the way through the state, and they started using marble for the stones, saying that it's going to last much longer than the other, and it really didn't work out. The marble stones wear out much quicker. The skull and crossbones, another symbol of death. This one's in the Sands Point family grave site, which I had to pull all kinds of strings to get into it. And it's one of the few examples of skull and crossbones headstone on Long Island. There is one or two in the East Hampton green. When you pull and you make that left into East Hampton, there's a few over there as well. This was fairly local. After the death heads fell out of favor, they started rounding it out and backing off a little bit on the skeleton and the hard style stone, and they started rounding it out and making it a little more pleasant to look at. They call it a soul effigy. The soul still flies off into heaven, just like the death heads, but it's a little easier to look at as the death heads fell out of favor. Roughly in one of the last ones was like 1760, 1770. So, but the soul effigies also predated them as well. They came around in the early 1700s. Then they started getting a little creative, like little cherub faces. It still has his wings. He's got a nice crown. He's a little chubby guy. This site here in Queens is very well preserved as well. It's right off of Jamaica Avenue. That's a very, very ornate stone. It's a human portrait effigy. This one's in Quogue. You'll notice the ornate scroll work. Very beautiful stone from the Connecticut area. This was a very well-to-do family over by the Glen Cove Mansion. They settled in that area and had lots and lots of money. So the stones in this family graveyard are all nicely carved and portray the people themselves. And of course, that portrays the person himself as well. This is some kind of bronze inlay, I believe, into granite. I just found this one recently, a couple of weeks ago. Tabletop graves. They're similar to box tombs, except they don't have the box. They're on Long Island, but they're kind of rare. We have some here at the Presbyterian Church. There's a few in Aquabog. These are on Shelter Island. There's some in East Hampton. They're not all that common. As you go into New England, they're more common. But again, they were very expensive to make, and the slabs were expensive to import. Lion Gardener stone. A complete, with a knight in his armor uniform, on sarcophagus on top of the tomb. The person that designed this particular tomb also designed St. Patrick's Cathedral and the Smithsonian. This is a crypt. A crypt is underground. You'll find a lot of these, believe it or not, on Long Island. Some are in plain view, some are hard to find. But the people are buried in the ground here. And it's usually more than one, like a family. This Young's Memorial Cemetery, the Youngs settled in Southold, but they moved out to the Oyster Bay area. And this depicts some of the early settlers along with the faithful servants. They found out later about the servants and they gave them their due and the respect that they deserve. Things changed in the 1800s. The soul effigies went away and the death heads went away, and they went to more symbolism. Here we have an urn that represents the soul, and the weeping willow, which represents crying over the soul. Another symbolism thing, heavenly music. You'll hear heavenly music when you get to heaven. You'll find a lot of anchors. And most of the time, it's from seafaring people, captains and whatnot, or people who worked on the sea, but it also represents the cross. So it has a religious side to it as well. This is very, very funny because the gentleman died first and he left the space for his wife, and at the bottom he put, "Meet me there." You'll see these obelisks from the Egyptian style all over Long Island. They're built in building block form because they're so heavy that you got to put one thing down at a time, but it's a symbol of power and money. This is a cute little plot. The mother and the father and the brother and another brother, and way in the back you have a daughter. So the whole family is buried there, and usually on the main stone, you'll see all the names. This is a beautiful monument in Patchogue, centerpiece of the Waverly Cemetery. Again, built in sections with nice statues and the urn on the top. This is a family mausoleum. They're all over the place. They're expensive to build. They're later on in the 1800s became popular. There's stained glass windows, and you can bury your family inside. And there's an example of the stained glass window on the other side. They're very nice. A modern mausoleum in Pine Lawn. Might not be so modern anymore. It was probably modern in the 70s. But inside, there's like water fountains, and you can places to sit to reflect on your loved ones. This is a beautiful interior shot of St. John's Cemetery in Middle Village. The beautiful marble with the stained glass reflecting off the floor. It's like infinite. It just keeps going. Here's another over-the-top mausoleum in Greenwood, complete with a sphinx, statues. Guy had a little bit of money. These are modern stones, laser etched. These are the current trend, and it remains to be seen how long they'll last. Here's another really modern stone, complete with a birch tree, 3D cardinals, 3D birch tree, and a nice little cedar in there. Brand new modern stone. Now we get to the military side. We have Revolutionary. This is in Yapank. You have Civil War. These are made of a composite. You'll see these stone. They're more like metallic composite things. They last very well. They were made from a Bridgeport manufacturer, and they went out of business during World War I because they needed the materials for the war. There's a bronze World War I plate. This is interesting. This guy was probably in the Navy. There's his Navy number, but he didn't have much to say. No comment. Noteworthy people buried on Long Island. President Teddy Roosevelt in Oyster Bay. We got our own president on Long Island. Jackie Robinson, he broke the color barrier in baseball. He's in Cypress Hills. You'll see everybody brings nice baseballs and bats. Very beautiful site for Jackie Robinson, and he deserves it. Jackson Pollock and Lee Krasner, the abstract artists, very, very famous. He died in a car accident. But there's his plot out in Springs in Southampton. Alonzo Chappelle, very important historical artist. He painted George Washington's farewell address at a place in Manhattan. Francis Tavern, that's it. And plus all other historical things like John Smith and Pocahontas. He finally got a historic sign just put up recently, about 2 or 3 weeks ago. Louis Armstrong's buried in Flushing, one of the inventors of jazz from New Orleans. Howard Cosell, the sportscaster, out in West Hampton. Leroy Grumman. Grumman employed 3/4 of the island at one time. He's buried out in Locust Valley. Jack Dempsey, the boxing champion. I think he was boxing champion for 6 years, buried out in Southampton. Rufus King was a founding father. He signed the Constitution. He's in Jamaica. General Nathaniel Woodhull, a great revolutionary hero from Mastic. He got captured in Jamaica and put on a prison ship, and he got injured and he didn't make it. Whitey Ford, famous Yankee pitcher, won a lot of World Series. The MVP, he's out in Locust Valley as well. Houdini's near Cypress Hills. He's not going to get out of this predicament. The infamous John Gotti. I was watching my back when I was here. The Rosenbergs were convicted spies selling our secrets of the atomic bomb to the Russians. They're buried in, what do you call it? Wellwood Cemetery down by the Southern State Parkway. Samuel Morse is in Greenwood, inventor of the telegraph. Rosalie Garner Jones, one of the great suffragists of Long Island. Me and my friend Ellen found this. It took quite a while to find. It's hard to find in the middle of the woods in Cold Spring Harbor.
You have to tell them that she wasn't allowed to be buried there.
That's right.
The priest of Cold Spring Harbor said no, so.
She was kind of a troublemaker. So they wouldn't let her be buried there. So she took her ashes and spread them on top of her family anyway. Harry Chapin, the great folk musician. You see all the nice taxi cabs from his songs. Mae West, she's buried at Cypress Hills. And true to Mae West form, she's on the second floor. So you have to come up to see her sometime. Leonard Bernstein, composer, one of the great composers, buried at Greenwood. Patricia Kennedy Lawford, one of JFK's sisters, buried right out here in Southampton. Why she made it here, I don't know, but. Famous jazz musician John Coltrane and his wife, right at Pine Lawn Cemetery. Stanford White, the great architect. He designed the Port Jeff train station, many, many classic buildings in Boxwood and St. James, or head of the harbor. Count Basie, the big band leader, he's also in Pine Lawn. Margaret Brown, Molly Brown, the unsinkable Molly Brown from the Titanic, is in Westbury.
St. Bridget's Cemetery.
Yeah. Survivor of the Titanic. I'm going to pass it over to my friend Bev, the local historian. He'll take over the Setauket sites. Let's have a hand for Bev.
Okay. Bob likes to get a local historian wherever he goes in his show, because he goes various places all around the island. So he asked me to do one small section here. This is, of course, the Setauket Presbyterian Churchyard, at least I think it is. It's actually a cemetery, because it was there before the church was there. It was there when it was just a community cemetery, and sort of the Presbyterian sort of took it over after 1714, when they decided to call it a Presbyterian church rather than just a meeting house. So a lot of people buried there too, including William Sidney Mount. He's buried there. And Abraham Woodhull, our spy, yeah, of course. And a coach dog. At the time, there wasn't any rules about what you could bury there. So in one of the sections, there's a coach dog. We had it on one of the Candlelight House tours. Nathaniel Brewster, our first minister, he's buried there. It's actually a cenotaph. In other words, it's a gravestone that was put there later because we don't know where he was buried. So it's called a cenotaph. And Brewster came in 1665, and in 1685, he was really in bad shape. And so it took another 20 years to get a regular minister to come out here to take over well, basically the only minister in the town of Brookhaven and Smithtown. Did both. Abraham Woodall, culprit spy ringleader. It's only been since turn that people constantly put coins and rocks and stuff on the gravestone. Before that, it just was never done, which indicates how many people are actually coming to see it. The Floyd family, that's a new stone, table stone, because the old one was crushed by one of the trees that came down during one of the storms. And so it's been replaced by that. And that is the first or second William Floyd. William Floyd II was buried there, who is the grandfather of our signer of the Declaration of Independence, William Floyd. That's Richard Floyd, I'm sorry, not William. Richard Floyd II, and is a grandfather of William Floyd. Oh, he put in one. This is my only Tyler relative buried in the Presbyterian Church, because after he was buried, his father died about 5 years later or so, but he became an Episcopalian, and so he's buried at Caroline. And all of my relatives now are buried at Caroline. William Sidney Mount, artist, and his stone is actually the back of it. It's facing where he grew up, which is in the house that was there where the library is today, Emma Clark Library. That's where he grew up. But his father died. His wife took the kids and moved in with their uncle at what's now the Hawkins Mount House on the corner of Stony Brook Road and 25A. And this is a rear view of the Caroline Episcopal Church, and it dates to 1729, but the congregation dates to 1723. So we're celebrating our 300th anniversary of the church now, and we have different programs planned all year long. In fact, in June, I'm going to be giving a talk at the Historical Society on the history of Caroline Church, if you're interested. That's at a T, right?
Yeah.
25 people, maximum.
Yeah, sign up early.
And the Melvilles, Ward and Dorothy. Philanthropists had a big impact on the town. We've got actually quite a few philanthropists. Childs, this building, and a number of others. The man who built the Emma Clark Library was a candy manufacturer in New York City and came out here. So, but anyway, Ward and Dorothy are buried there, and he died in 76. I always get the two of them together because two of my favorite people. Ward Melville died in 76, and Kate Strong died in 77. But she's buried in the Smith Strong graveyard on Strong's Neck. Israel Bennett, another relative of mine. I bet you didn't know that. One of 7 Revolutionary War soldiers buried in Caroline Church graveyard. Elizabeth Moore, 1751, she died. We don't know anything about her. Her it's carved beautifully on a rock. The carving is exactly the same as one of the stones we have in the cemetery for a Revolutionary War soldier. It's exactly the same. They both died the same year. They were both carved by the same person. One on this stone and the other on a regular gravestone. So who was Elizabeth Moore? We can't trace her at all. Was she an indentured servant? And they just did a stone for her? Was she a enslaved person? We just don't know. I don't know if we'll ever find out. St. George Manor Cemetery, that's where Anna Smith Strong and Sheila Strong are buried. That's those two gravestones that you see there, these two, with the sort of the urn on the top. And William Tangier Smith, again, this is a cenotaph because he died in 1705 and there was no gravestone for him or his wife, Madame Martha Smith. But they have two famous books. They're called the pigskin books. One of them belongs to Jack Strong, and it has lots of recipes in it from Madame Martha. And the other one belongs to the Bellport Historical Society. So we've gotten a lot of records out of that too. And so did John Strong, different John Strong, who wrote a book about Native Americans and about all kinds of things to do with the local area. There's Sheila Strong and Anna Smith Strong. Sheila is the one on the left. He's got the newer marker. This is actually the rear end of the gravestone. Their names on the stone itself are on the other side. Nobody buried there except Smith and Strong, except one person. Bethel AME Church Cemetery. This is probably the original site of the first Bethel AME Church, 1779, I believe. It burned, and then they built the current one in 1909, which is at Laurel Hill Cemetery. And it used to be very difficult to get up the hill there, but a scout came along and made a nice pathway around so you can walk up into the cemetery, and it backs right up from the Jolinas Junior High School. Thompson, there are a number, there's I think 11 private cemeteries here in the Three Village area, and the Thompson Private Family Cemetery is one of them. The only Thompson that's not buried there is the guy who built the Thompson House. He's buried at the Presbyterian Church, and he has a replacement gravestone because his broke off and his wife's broke off. But you walk around the church and it's right there. That's Jonathan Thompson. Jonathan and his son, Samuel, Dr. Samuel Thompson, were both involved in the Revolutionary War, although we don't have any records of what they did. But they left Long Island because they were outed as spying for the Culper spy ring. So they felt it was better to be in Connecticut for a while. And we don't know when they came back, but before the end of the war.
That's it for the local side of it. This is the grand finale. Okay, things that you might run into at a cemetery or a graveyard. Deer in Port Jefferson. Turkeys in Sag Harbor. Turtles Cats. Foul odors from the nearby duck farm. This was Aquabog. I was walking around going, what is that smell? This is interesting. This is in the middle of Calvary Cemetery. It's the smallest New York City park in the system. It couldn't be any more than the size of the stage. It's a Civil War monument. It's the smallest New York City park. Squirrels, bees, eagles nesting on the South Shore. This is a recent picture. They're still there. They're in a cell tower. And finally, the mayor. When I went to Greenwood, there was Mayor de Blasio walking with his wife. I hope you enjoyed it. Anybody have any questions?
Do you have any sense whether the carvers of the stones made multiple copies and then when he died?
That did become into play eventually. Stone carvers is a whole nother science. We know a little bit about some of them. And one of the old ones is actually still in existence in, I think, Rhode Island. But each one of them had their own style. So we had a wide variety of folk art, and it's actually very important. It's a very original American art form, the carvings on stones. But as things progressed and technology improved, they started mass producing them and just putting the names on and the symbols later.
So even though they would make them very similar to a previous one, they weren't mass produced. They were just
No, they were mass produced.
Well,
They would have a stack of them, and they would just put the names on.
okay.
Anything else? Anybody else?
Yeah, you said we lost some to development. You could just develop it regular?
In New York City, countless grave sites were lost. Whether it was, what had happened was land became so valuable that they just took it upon themselves, like, don't worry about it, just build over it anyway, we need the space. And unfortunately, it's not very nice, but it is a fact. We lost so many nice sites due to development. They're underneath roads, basically.
We have a couple of questions online, if I can ask.
Okay.
So Gwen is asking, is there a place where there is a written description of some of the memorable burials in some of the historic cemeteries?
There is at your local library. They come from a lot of different sources. There are very nice books. There's one book that I have, Early Gravestones of Long Island. It shows you the types of stones, but it doesn't really pinpoint where they are. You got to do your own research and do your own searching, and that's the fun of it, really.
There's another question here. Margot is saying, oh no, can't read this. Annette Williamson behind Country House?
Yes. Right. Yeah. Well, yes. There's Annette Williamson was part supposedly killed in the house. And there are stories around that her ghost still haunts the house, and she's buried behind the house. So it makes for a very nice tale. We went out to dinner, me and my wife there. We didn't find any. We didn't see any ghosts. Anybody see any ghosts in the country house? Any locals?
Did you ever take a
Yeah.
tour? Greenwood Cemetery has like nighttime tours you can take. Have you ever done it?
The first time we went to Greenwood was a tour. So yes, they have lots and lots of tours, and they have them at night as well. So does Three Village.
Yeah.
We have nighttime tours, and you carry a lantern around.
Virginia says, I believe there is a small cemetery on Ottawa Lane here in Stony Brook. Is there anything known about it?
La La Lane? I don't know. Do you know anything about that, Beth?
That's the one, yeah, that's behind the country house.
Oh, okay.
It's up on the hill. There's two rivers.
You can actually get to it from both sides of the hill. There's,
Actually, there's a step, there's a whole pathway and steps on the Walla.
yes. I've been to that one. It needs a little help and TLC.
There are two Revolutionary War soldiers there.
That is correct. That's on the radar to be refurbished.
I think Jeanette's grandson wants to help.
Yes, I live on Walla.
Right.
And it was a little overgrown and the town will come and, the town actually owns the cemeteries.
Right.
Owns the land and they will come and do the cutting of that. But we haven't looked at it in years and it would be good if we could get it, you know, what I'm sure.
I'll talk to Barbara about it. If a cemetery like that does get abandoned, and it happens quite often, the town does take it over.
Yeah, well, Barbara said that you just put your name on the list and they'll come and cut the grass.
Yeah, they do it though, right?
It does have a fence around it.
Yeah.
It has a fence around it. And that's right, the steps that go up there. It's just like two houses in. It's not very far.
Right. I had recently found a grave site that was supposedly lost forever. And I tried finding it a couple of times. It's down on Mill Road going towards Yaphank. And I came up empty-handed. And then I just happened to be talking to somebody from the area that I had just recently met. I'm like, yeah, I've been looking for this grave site. He goes, oh, I know where it is. I'm like, I hit the right guy. So I, in turn, told Barbara about it. And it's being saved. There was construction to be on it. It was almost on the verge of being lost forever. So we're going to put a nice fence around it and give it its due deserve.
But, Bear, remember when we went to Greenwood Cemetery? You took a tour to Greenwood? And there's when you were showing the pictures of the, what do they call them, the little houses with the, there's
The
one where
Mausoleums?
they say a mass once a year, is said inside one of those. There's a whole altar and everything inside.
Right. There are a lot of chapels. Like there's a chapel at Calvary. It's beautiful. It's Gothic. It's beautiful, and they have services. You know, so that's quite common.
We have two questions online. Nancy's asking, did Rob categorize Agudas Achim? Am I saying it wrong? Achim? Agudas Achim Cemetery is a secular cemetery?
It is. I did.
Okay. She just wanted clarification.
I did say it was a secular cemetery. Yes.
Okay.
And it's one of the earliest Jewish cemeteries, and I believe it's a product of Chicken Hill. Is that correct, Bev?
It's a cemetery which some of the Jewish families that were on Chicken Hill were buried there. Unfortunately, after the factory burned and most of the Jewish families left this area to find work, the congregation, they closed the church, the synagogue. And so they transferred the title to the cemetery to the Riverhead Jewish.
Right. Yeah, I've been to that
A
one.
lot of people buried there who were from Riverhead.
Right. Yeah, that's still in operation. They still have burials there. Yeah, but it does have an old section.
People online are asking if you can either repeat that or summarize what.
Yes, the cemetery here, the Jewish cemetery here in Setauket, or it's on the border of Stony Brook almost, but is associated with a Jewish cemetery in Riverhead, right on the main drag going through Flanders area. And that's also a very, very nice Jewish cemetery that's got some age and it's still in operation.
Rob, where is it, Mrs. Tucker?
Mud Road and Ridgeway, this corner. It's on Mud Road by Ridgeway, this corner there, across the water tower.
It's very close to here, actually. Yes, it's very, very, very close.
You can go up one road in the beginning there.
It's
10, 15 times and Never seen it.
There's no sign of it.
Right, as Bev is saying for the Zoom people, it's on Mud Road and it's not easy to find. You have to kind of know where it is. But,
Nancy Goldstein is saying her grandparents, her great grandparents and grandparents and other relatives are buried there.
yeah, it's a very historic site. It's one of the earliest on Long Island.
I have another online question. Gloria is asking, how often is high incidence of child mortality reflected in local cemeteries?
Very, very often. Unfortunately, it was a fact of life back in the colonial days. You'll have child graves pretty much in every cemetery. You're lucky if you had 8 children, if 4 of them survived through their 20s. Females also had high mortality rate through childbirth. And in general, medicine wasn't as advanced. So the life expectancy of the early settlers was not very high. And you'll see quite a few children's graves in even the local sites here. Yeah, did anything spooky happen to me? Not really spooky, but when I went to the William Floyd estate one day in the middle of the summer, I had shorts on. And I was walking towards the cemetery, and I look down and I see 30 mosquitoes on my legs. And it was painful. I actually ran for my life. But I'm sorry.
You showed a picture of one cemetery that had indigenous individuals. Now, when I think of indigenous peoples, I'm thinking of burial mounds and that kind of thing. Are there a lot of instances of
Not a whole lot of them survived. For whatever reasons, they were forgotten about, and then through nature and trees, and they just disappeared. So these sites that did survive are quite rare. There's one gentleman named Paul Cuffey, which is in a mural in the Alms House in Yaphank during the New Era, when FDR, when we were in the Depression, and FDR gave money out to the arts for people to make murals. There's a mural of Paul Coffey in Yaphank, and it's he was a Shinnecock preacher, and he's buried near the railroad tracks. And supposedly they put the railroad tracks around them. They had to actually, so it's one site. And it's a very, very important site. It's in like a kind of by where the OBI East was.
We also have other famous burials. Gary Cooper and his wife are buried out in the Hamptons.
Yes,
Cemetery.
that's the same one as Jack Dempsey.
Peter Boyle from Everyone Loves Raymond played the father. He's buried out there
Right.
as well. We also have Captain Kangaroo.
That's right. That's right. That's right. There's a lot more. I could have went on forever. I picked the most common ones, but we got to keep it under an hour.
Great. There's one more question here. And let's say this is the last online question before wrapping up. Do you have any other pictures from the Sands Point plot? I am watching from Pennsylvania, and when we visited in the fall of 2021, we couldn't get access. My maternal side, Sands, and my aunt has done a lot of genealogy, and we'd love to have any pictures that you would be willing to share.
Send your email address to Marty. I did photograph it extensively. It took all kinds of bells and whistles to get in there, and I was very honored that I had the chance. It's in a very private section, and you have to go through the police and everything else. I do have other pictures of it, so send your email to Marty, and I'll look into that for you.
I go Woodlawn Cemetery in France, that's just great.
That place is on the awesome level, way up here.
I can't believe it.
Woolworth is buried there, Duke Ellington, Irving Berlin, and the money that was spent on these mausoleums, they look like castles. I was telling my friend Rob here, I've been there 3 times and I haven't seen more than half of it. And I can't wait to go back. It's really, really worth the trip. It's right on the Bronx River Parkway, and it's not too far out of the city. Woodlawn. It's something worth seeing. I give you my word on that. I'm sorry.
I used to go to Lindbergh kidnapping tour there, bus, and that's where they all met.
Right.
At Woodlawn.
They do have tours there. You can organize a tour, but it's very easy to get to. It's only maybe 15 minutes out of the city.
St. Raymond, you meant to?
What?
Bronx, St. Raymond?
I'm sorry?
St. Raymond.
Most of the sites I've seen are on Long Island. I'm starting to hit New England, which is scary because it's a little further, but it's the stones are older and they're more, you have more variety. There was more stone cutters and there's a lot to explore up in New England, a ton. So gotta take it one thing at a time. I hope you enjoyed it, everyone.